WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects: mathematics, English language, physics, chemistry, and biology, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates on this station. Learners can also connect with Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.
Good day, learners. We are here again today. You are welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. I'm sure by the end of the lesson, biology lesson today, you will learn something new. Come along with me.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
The topic again is forms in which cells exist. And the lesson objective, which we put as learning objectives, which is expected that by the end of the lesson you would have learned something new, includes the following. The first is you should be able to state the forms in which cells exist. The second learning objective is you should be able to discuss each form. The third one is you will be able to distinguish between two different forms, which is known as colonial cells and filamentous cells. The last subtopic or objectives for today is you will be able to state examples of cells existing as part of living organisms. You know, we are living organisms. You will get to know what we mean by that. Okay? Forms in which cells exist. We know what cells are. Our body is built up of cells. Like you have a building with several blocks. Cell is often said to mean the basic units, functional and structural units of life. So these same cells, we are looking at it today as occurring in 4 different forms. How many forms? 4. Come with me. The first form is known as single, independent, free living, or solitary. These 4, they occur as one. The form again, single, independent, free living, solitary. This is one form. The second form in which cells exist is known as colony or colonial cells. Colony or colonial cells. The third one is known as filaments or filamentous cells. Filament or filamentous cells. And the last objective for today is cells exist as part of living organism. Remember I said we have many cells in our bodies. We are starting with the first type. And the first form in which cells exist is known as independent, free living, solitary, or single. As the name depicts, that means a cell occurs singly, is solitary. It lives an independent life. This type of cell is commonly found in organisms that are called unicellular organisms. What did I call them? Unicellular organisms. That is, they have a single cell in their bodies. And most of these cells, they are often referred to as microscopic because ordinary eyes cannot see them. Let's look at their examples. We have the first example as amoeba. We have the second example as paramecium. The third example of solitary form of cells is ignena. We have Chlamydomonas. These are not all. They are more. We are only using these ones as examples. Here I have images, pictures of the 4 forms of cells that I mentioned earlier on. Here, I have this first one here as Chlamydomonas. The second one up is called amoeba. Can you see this? What shape does it have? A slipper shape. It's called paramecium. And the fourth example is what is known as Ignena. 4 different forms. 4 different forms in which the cells exist. So we've looked at these 4 different types of solitary or independent cells. We have more examples here. Here I have amoeba, and this one is called Ignena. These different cells, they are single entity. They have the ability to carry out the activities of life. What do I mean by activities of life? These single cells, they are able to move on their own. They are sensitive to changes in their environment. They carry out nutrition on their own, not minding the fact that we have a single cell in them. Here we have, I've highlighted some of the features or activities carried out by this single, solitary, independent, or cells that we have. So they are all these cells. For example, amoeba uses what is called pseudopodia. That is a plural form. Singular is pseudopodium. It uses it for movement, and at the same time, it uses it to carry out feeding. How does it do that? It engulfs the food. That is not the subject of discussion today. Paramecium, it's able to move with a finger-like structure, hair-like structure on its body called cilia, and it takes in food like a holozoic organism. We have Ignena and Chlamydomonas. These organisms, looking at their structures, you will see that Chlamydomonas has like a whip-like structure, which is called flagellum. So it uses it to move. The same thing with Ignena. Look at the flagellum. So they use it for their movements. At the same time, they have chloroplast. What is the usefulness of chloroplast? It enables plants to photosynthesize because of the presence of green color. So like I said earlier on, they are capable of reproducing by themselves, the single cells, and they carry out heterotrophic nutrition. That is, amoeba, paramecium carries out heterotrophic nutrition. Ignena and Chlamydomonas, Ignena carries out autotrophic, so it's a plant. And if you call it animal, you are right. It's only Chlamydomonas that cannot carry out activities of life, of living things, of heterotrophic way of feeding. It only carries out autotrophic feeding. And here we have another form. Remember the first form that we looked at was what? Solitary, independent. The second form, we call it celled as a colony. In this form, in which some cells exist, these cells, they are composed of numerous or similar cells that they are joined by strands of protoplasm. What did I call it? Strands of protoplasm, the living material in a cell. So these cells, like they form a cluster around each other. What do they have? They have a nucleus, they have cytoplasm, they have flagella. What do they use flagella for? Movement. And the cells occur as colonies, several individuals. They cluster around each other. How do they do that? They have a common cytoplasmic strand. So they have a common cytoplasm. You know what is cytoplasm? The function of it. Many colonial cells have specialized cells for reproduction, while others are for photosynthesis and some other functions. So they do not live like we saw in independent cells that are able to carry out the activities of life on their own. Here, there's a kind of differentiation that some cells are designated for reproduction. Some, each individually, they are able to carry out photosynthesis. But when it's time for them to move, they go in a coordinated way. Here is an example of colonial organism. You see it. You look at the single, look at the board clearly. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 single individuals. But what do we have? They have a common cytoplasm, so they cluster around each other. I have another example here of colonial organism. You still have it here. Can you see the flagella on this end? This we saw earlier on, and looking at this, you will see that they have a common pool. So what do we call the second form in which cells exist? Colonial. They form a colony. And the third form in which cells exist is known as filaments. A filament, I like describing it like a thread. You know how a thread looks like? A thread, not a single line, but like a thread that we use in making clothes. Or you look at sugar cane. We like taking sugar cane. When you look at sugar cane, you will discover that sugar cane has several segments. A filament has a similar look. Filaments or filamentous cells, how are they? They are joined end to form unbranched filaments. They only break when they want to reproduce to form new one, when they are reproducing asexually. They lost independent cells, they possess independent cells that are separated by intercellular walls. What do I mean by intercellular walls? These are walls that separate one cell from another. When you look at this and you compare it with the first two forms of cells that we consider, you know there's a difference. Each cell is able to carry out activities of life by reproducing on their own. Interestingly, Spirogyra is an example of a cell that occurs as filaments. Spirogyra can reproduce asexually and at the same time sexually, but in two different ways. We continue. Here I have example, a structure of filaments. Here is a single one. You can see this at this point, the intercellular wall. Here is a cell, this is another one. So on this filament, I have four segments, four different types of cells. The same thing can be said. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 individual cells, but they are joined end to end. What do we call this? Spirogyra. It's an example of a filamentous cell. In a tabular form, examination bodies, they like testing students' knowledge concerning this. Supposing you are asked to write a simple question, differentiate between colonial and filamentous cells. If they are putting in a tabular form, my dear, you need to put a table. So I have done these differences in a tabular form. Colonial cells, and on the other side, I have filamentous cells. When you are working on a table like this, examination bodies expect you to draw a table and discuss your point across board. For example, organisms under colonial form a mass of similar cells. I'm discussing the same points under filamentous. Organisms, they form array of organisms that resembles a filament. Another difference, colonial cells appear as a sphere. You know how to draw a sphere, all right? Whereas filamentous cells occur as what? A thread. I did mention that earlier on. Another important difference between the two, a colony is considered to be what? That they are sessile. What does it mean? They have ability to move. Remember, they have what? Flagella. Each individual cell has flagella, so they are able to move. That's what I mean by sessile. But coming to filamentous, they do not have structure for movement, so they are not sessile. And what do they have? They float on water bodies. If you are asked to look for one, you get to the water body. It's actually for the two. And the last difference is colonial cells, they do not have intercellular cells. But in the filamentous cells, they have what is called intercellular cells. The other time we were looking at a filament, I did mention the fact that you have cells occurring end to end. So there is a wall that separates them. That is what we mean by intercellular cell. I want you to quickly attend this activity. The first one, state the four forms in which cells exist. Did you hear that? State the four forms in which cells exist. Question number 2, mention 2 examples of each form. We have cells existing in the following forms, likely answers. Compare your own answers with what I have put up together. What is the first one? 4 forms. The first one is what? Independent, solitary. You can write either, single. The second one is what? Colony. The third one is what? Cells occur or exist as a filament, and finally as part of an organism. We are to give examples of the cells, the forms in which the cells exist. Independent, we have amoeba, we have paramecium, Chlamydomonas and others. For colony, we have volvox, we have Pandorina as another example. In filaments, the very common one that we can identify with is the Spirogyra. In body of water, you see it like a thread, like a line, always green in color. Then the last one is as part of organism. And here the focus is on multicellular organism. We are looking at you and myself. We have several cells in our bodies. We will look at some of the cells that forms tissue, organ, and makes an entire system in a short while. We are looking at cells as a part of living organisms. What do we mean by this? Multicellular organisms are made up of what? Group of cells, which are similar in shape and structure. So gradually there's a progression there. You have several cells that they are integrated together. We're taught they form tissue, from tissue to organ to system. They contain specialized cells, which takes up roles and work together to perform a specific function. We will come back to this as we progress with the lesson. There is a progression from, I've mentioned this earlier, cell to tissue, tissue to organ, and organ to system. Here we want to take example of how cells exist. I want you to be very attentive. Cell existing as part of living organisms. We have them occurring at the cell level, tissue level, organ level, and system level. Let's look at this. We are focusing on circulatory system. That is a body in the body of a multicellular organism. But what do we have? My RBC and WBC. My RBC, do you know what my RBC stands for? Are you talking to me? Okay. Red blood cell. What is my WBC? White blood cells. I wrote this way because of space. We have cells occurring in our bodies as white blood cell, red blood cell. They carry out specific functions. Defense of the body is carried out by white blood cells, while the transportation of oxygen for cellular respiration is the responsibility of red blood cells. Are they carrying out the same functions? Not at all. When they are integrated together alongside with platelets, they form what is called tissue. Several cells clustering together, they form tissues, and the tissue here is the blood. From the blood, when it's going around the body, we have an organ. What is the name of that organ? It is the heart. Your heart is pumping the blood. It consists of red blood cell, white blood cell, platelet, and other cells in the body. So it mixes up and it forms blood at the tissue level. The heart is pumping the blood out, and through the circulatory system, you know, this same blood goes around the entire body. And that is what we have here. They are what? Coordinated, and they form an organism. So in this way, here we have cells, we have tissue, we have organ. What cell is this? What about this? Can you identify this organ? And this organ, there is another organ system. Several of the organs, you find them together here. Here you have intestine, small and large. I'm seeing rectum. Then we have what looks like the liver there. But where do we find it? In the body of a multicellular organism. And that's why you have the body of a human here. In concluding today's lessons, I want you to take home the fact that living things can either be unicellular and or multicellular. Unicellular, single cell, they carry out activities of life. Multicellular, several cells that coordinate together. Their cells occur in 4 different forms. Each form has the ability to carry out all the processes or activities of life. I will be leaving you with this question. I expect you to attempt it. When you answer this question, you can always get the responses back to us. Question number 1 says, list 4 forms in which cells exist with one example each. I know biology students, you don't really like drawing, but you have to learn to draw. You have to make a drawing. What is the unit of measurement? 6 to 8 centimeter long of a typical cell, and it says label fully. Draw it, share it with me. How to reach us will be given to you soon. In a tabular form, state 3 differences between a plant cell and an animal cell. Another question says you have to state 3 similarities that you can find in both plant and animal cell. And the last question you are taking home today, name and briefly describe with diagram. Are you saying that? You have to name and let what you are naming and describing come with a diagram, the forms in which living cells exist. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. For comments, for questions, for clarifications, contact us on the social media handle on display. Thank you.
Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects: mathematics, English language, physics, chemistry, and biology, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates on this station. Learners can also connect with Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.